Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to another episode in our Working Together series, live Q&A session with Rabbi Ingber and our wonderful friends in the Netiv Zoom room down in Texas. They've joined by lots of their regulars, and it's always good to see people come back with questions. Always nice to hear what the Rabbi has to share and get the juices flowing in the mind. So let's just jump right in and see how Rabbi Ingber's doing today.
Okay, good to see you all.
Shalom, Rabbi.
Good to
I'm
see
gonna
you. Welcome,
just
welcome. Dan, can you just put off the my yeah, thank you. Okay, good. All right. Hi everybody. So it's a very powerful time. So I really wanted to speak to you because today is Jewish people have a fast day today. It's a fast day called the 17th of Tammuz. And it right now it's a very heavy, powerful time. And I want to explain a little bit what it is, how it relates to you all, and to understand a little bit the history and where we're going. So this today, well, it was yesterday, but it was the Sabbath. So today is the day that a lot of negative things happened. The first of which was the tablets that Moshe brought down from Mount Sinai, and Moses brought from Mount Sinai, were broken. Okay, he saw the people worshiping the golden calf, and I want to point that, as we mentioned a few weeks ago, to be clear on this, the golden calf was essentially set up by the what's called the Erev Rav, the mixed multitudes that came out from Egypt. We talked about that. Mike had a few questions about that last time. To understand the relationship, the Jews protest, not protest, but the reality, and the reason why I'm telling you this, that to understand it was essentially from the mixed multitudes, is for a very important reason, because these sort of mixed multitudes still exist. And sometimes you might hear of Jews that have ideas that seem totally contrary to Jewish belief. And you can't figure it out. Like you don't understand. And so, unfortunately, we still have in the reality of the world, until these things are all brought to their ultimate rectification, we have situations where the holy Jews that are learning the Torah, what you all want to connect to, are in one place. And then you'll see people saying other ideas, saying, well, I'm Jewish, and their ideas are contrary to Jewish beliefs. You have to know that. You have to know. Sometimes you're going to hear them saying things, and wait a minute, this is Jewish, and it's not. And that's because generally on a certain level, and I don't know, I can't tell you who in particular, because if they're Jewish, they're Jewish, but there is that mixed multitude that came out of Egypt that is still somehow amongst us. And when you hear ideas that are anti-Jewish from Jews, you have to kind of understand that they got a problem, and we hope they'll understand and get it together. But that's what's happening. So on the 17th of Tammuz, which is celebrated today, Moshe came down to the mountain and saw the Jews worshiping the golden calf. And what he did was he took the tablets and he broke them. Okay. So that became a very negative day, and a lot of negative things happened during that time. And for the next 3 weeks is called a time called Bein HaMitzarim, between the narrows, the straits. A narrow thing, the word in Hebrew for narrow, tsar, is the same word as pain. Because when you're in a state of being contrite, or not contrite really, being constrained, that you can't really be what you are, that's pain. So we're in this 3 weeks now that's called this time of Bein HaMitzarim, between the troubles, or between the straits. And what happened was, on this day also, later on in history, the walls of Jerusalem were broken. And 3 weeks later, the enemies came and destroyed the Holy Temple, which is going to be another fast day for the Jews in 3 weeks, called the 9th day of Av, Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av, which is the day both temples were destroyed. Many, many bad things happened on that day. Both temples were destroyed. The whole city of Beitar was destroyed. And during the rebellion of Bar Kokhba, over 1 million people were killed there. Many, even modern times, the Holocaust really actually starts on the 9th of Av. It just happened to be the way it was, because the First World War was really the precursor to the Second World War. So a lot of bad things happened. And this time, therefore, we have to understand this. And the reason why it's so important for you all to understand, and it's going to be tying with this week's Torah portion also, the portion of Bilam, is because of Balak, it's called, but it's about Bilam, and I'll explain who he is because you all have a very important job. A very, very important job. And that job is to help people in the world who are leading the world astray to direct things properly. And this is what I've mentioned many times, but the Talmud says, if the nations of the world knew what the temple provided for them, not only would they have not have destroyed it, but they would have 24-hour guards protecting it. In the time of Solomon, of King Shlomo, there was no famines. There was no natural catastrophes. You know, I'm not going to get into discussion of climate change, and maybe this is maybe not. But I know one thing. I know if there was a temple, you would not have these natural disasters. You would not have, the famines. So everyone's going about things in the wrong way. If people had their eyes open and realized what this place was. But unfortunately, as we mentioned 2 weeks ago, the people running the world are people who seem to run the world, because God runs the world. The people who seem to run the world are people who don't understand that there's a God and there's a plan and it's going someplace. And, they think the world's out of control and Bill Gates has got to stop the sun from shining. And, they're making these crazy calculations because they're walking in the dark without a knowledge that there is a creator of the world who's directing the world. So they're going to do everything to change whenever they think they have to. So that being said, so you have to understand, so if the nations of the world would have put 24-hour guards to protect the temple, it's going to be crucial to understand what the temple provided and what is the world is doing now that is the opposite, because we want to build the temple again. That has to happen, and that will happen. But when the world is not ready for it, God will not let it happen. So we got to pave the way. That's our job. What God's going to want to do and how he's going to do it, that's his calculations. But he put us in this world to do something. So you all have to realize that you have a very important mission, because the world is nuts and getting nuttier. And therefore, it has to become clear what we need to do and to understand what's going on. So this week's Torah portion is the portion of Balak. And Balak, it was the king of Moab. He was away from Midian originally. And in the story in the Torah portion, he hires this guy Bilam to curse the Jews. Now, who is this Bilam? This Bilam person is very important for you to know, because Bilam was a non-Jewish prophet. There were prophets that existed. The Jews had many, many prophets. But until the time of the building of the tabernacle, the desert, the non-Jews had prophets too. Talks about 7 prophets of the non-Jews. Some you've heard of, some you haven't. I mean, you heard of Job. Job was one. He was a non-Jewish prophet. So Bilam was a prophet. His father, Beor, was a prophet. And these people were powerful people of the nations of the world. And if you look in the Torah, Moshe prays to God that there shouldn't be any more prophets amongst the nations, only from the Jewish people. And that's why Bilam is going to be the last of the prophets of the nations. But here's the problem that you all need to kind of deal with. The reason why we had to remove prophecy from the nations of the world, because your leaders were leading you astray in a very terrible way. Bilam was terrible. He actually opened up terrible things that people had stopped doing. There was illicit relations. The world, as you see now, the world going nuts, that was happening at the time of the flood. It says, there was periods of times where there were nudist colonies all over the place, and there was illicit relations, and the time of the flood was terrible. We discussed that. And then the nations of the world said, hey, we can't act like this. Bilam gave advice on how to open the doors to lead to illicit relations. That's really what he did. He started that process again, and that was a prophet of the nations of the world. So Moshe prays no, this is not good. They're not leading their people in the right way. Now, I want to discuss a little bit. I mean, it's a little hard to understand. What do you mean? Is a prophet? What kind of prophet? Really a prophet? A high level, low level? A lot of discussions. But I'm going to start with what Bilam, before the discussion, he was given some prophecy on a real level of prophecy, and the sages says that was for the good of the Jewish people. He ended up trying to curse them and bless them, and all the different reasons why the sages say it happened. But Bilam's original power is not really prophecy. It's actually called kishuf, michush. It's called in English, I guess, sorcery. Because God created systems in the world. There's a system of holiness, and there's a system of non-holiness that parallels it. And the reason for the system of not holiness, which we call impurity, tuma, is because a person is in a balance where there's things pulling you this way, pulling you that way, and we need to choose. So there has to be a system of impurity that parallels the system of purity. It doesn't fully parallel because the system of purity goes all the way up, connects back to its source. The system of impurity is a creation that God made to test people, not just to test them, to give them the ability to free will to choose how to live their lives. But Bilam was a guy who hooked into these powers. Crazy stuff he was doing. Those who read the parsha in detail, he was his wife was his donkey. Now, you might say, well, that's kind of weird. What did that mean? He had a cute donkey. What was his attraction to donkeys? So I don't know what his attraction to donkeys was, but I know that Bilam, part of his idea of why he did that was because it brought upon him a spirit of impurity. I actually spoke this week to somebody who was not Jewish, and they actually converted a number of years ago, and they told me that they had looked into some of these like pagan things and were like doing these weird black magic dark things, and they exist. How much people can do them today, I don't know. But Bilam knew, and he was a guy who was hooked into the sources of impurity. And he was able to, because of the system that God created, he was able to get information and certain power to do in the world. And even at one point, he got some level of prophecy, but God did communicate to him in some way, even though he wasn't worthy of it. But when that happens, Bilam, he uses his powers in a negative way. How could it be? If a person is like so spiritual and so knowledgeable, and then even gets some communication, some level, how do you use that for bad? I want to explain something to you. One of the things, and it's a question what Noachites can do or not. We'll do in general, stay away from all this stuff. But there's something called nichush. Nichush is where a person, it's called divinates. They try to figure out what's going to happen. Why is it going to happen? And usually these people today are they don't know anything. They're usually just these nut jobs who read your cards and the tarot cards. But that's not, there really is a system of impurity a person could hook into. And that was what Bilam was about. Even when God communicated with him, what he wanted to do was to push God to do what he wanted. The power of what's called nichush, this forbidden thing in the Torah to divinate, is to try to manipulate the world to get what you want, irrespective of what God wants. And that is the ultimate break for being a human being. Because as a human being, I want to build and I want to create and I want to do. But when I start to think that I'm going to do it against what God wants, I make myself my own God. And the trouble starts there. And that's why even today, people that don't know, they're not really in these, they don't know any of these things of impurity. They substitute their technology for that power. But when your technology believes that I am going to solve all the problems, of course, we're supposed to try to invent things. But when you think you're going to use your technology and outwit God, God forbid, to, it's like, I can't tell you why certain things happen in the world. I'm not a prophet. I can't tell you. But, you have a lot of things that when you see certain diseases coming in the world, certain things, a thinking person might pull back and say, are we doing anything wrong? If you ask that question today, you are ridiculed. What do you mean? No, we'll solve it. We'll create a vaccine. We'll create this. We'll create that. Well, maybe you should ask the first question. Maybe you're doing the wrong things. But that's not the question, because the mindset of the world was like Bilam. I'm in control. Bilam, I don't know if it's better or worse. In one way, he knew there was God, and he thought that he could outwit God. Today, people either think that, or they don't care that, or they grew up with these ideas of, religion, because, and this is a product of the Catholic Church, really, where science and religion became two different things. Religion was the world of fairy tales, and science was, Galileo says, look into my telescope and you'll see that the world does revolve around the sun. And they said, no, we don't need to do that, because we have our dogmatic wrong way of understanding the Torah. So the world created, so even for like religious Christians, they often can't put together their belief system, and they think, okay, science and science. No, there is no argument between science and Torah. There can't be. That's absurd. But what happened was that people in the world now sort of moved, maybe there is a God, maybe it's not a God, but we'll figure out how to really control it. And just, if there is a God, just don't get in our way, because we're going to do what we want to do. That is the legacy of Bilam. And Moshe said, pray to Hashem, no more. And this is something so important for you all, because your leaders are leading you astray. They really are. I mean, I can't tell you the leaders in the Jewish world is different kind of leaders, is the leaders who people think are the elected leaders, but those aren't the leaders. I mean, it's a fascinating thing. Like I was in the house of some of the leaders of Israel. I was in the house of Rabbi Yoshev. Rabbi Yoshev was the leading rabbi, passed away, I guess, about 15 years ago already. He was a leading rabbi. I remember one time he called for people to come out to have a gathering, because they were going to do something that he felt and the governor was doing something against Jewish law, and he called people to gather. He called people. 600,000 people showed up. If I said, hey, I want everyone to come out and have a march, and 600,000 people would not just show up, So Rabbi Yoshev was the lead. Now, Rabbi Yoshev was never elected. He had no position, and he lived in a 2-room house. I was in his house. It was this 2-room house. It was like, could you imagine, the guy who's got the mega church, and he's got 600,000 people. You think he's going to live in a 2-room apartment? But that's who he was. He wasn't elected. But everyone knew. Also, I was by my rabbi, Rabbi Scheinberg. That's how he also. He had a phone, it was before cell phones. He had a phone that he shared with his son-in-law. They had one phone. She lived for someone upstairs, and he lived downstairs. He had one phone. They didn't have 2 lines even. And they lived in a small house. Never elected, and he can get a million people to do what he said. But that was the inner circle. Those are the Jews who are listening to the sages. But then there's leaders who people think they're leaders, but the people who are in the know, no, they're not. They're elected politicians, whatever. And that's what's happening here also. Leaders that are misleading America and the world. It's all in the same thing. I shared this with you once, and I'll just share it again because it's in this week's parasha. And I literally don't mean this. I said it before, but I want to say it again. I don't mean this to insult the President of the United States, because, as I said, the law is that when Moshe went to Pharaoh, he had to show honor for the position. The person became a leader. You can't just, he leads the nation. But I have to say it because you need to understand. So one of the reasons why it says that God gave Bilam prophecy was because people could complain otherwise and say, if we had Moshe, we had Moses, then we would have kept the Torah too. So God had to give a prophet. So he gave Bilam. So I have a question. It's not how does it answer the problem? People could still say, the nations of the world could still say, you gave us Bilam, who was a bum. Give us Moshe, give us Moses. So the answer is Bilam had tremendous power, tremendous understanding, which he chose to use for bad. The power was given. Moshe had power, Bilam had power, and Bilam chose to use it bad. But why? How'd that work? Because the leader is the sum total of the people. And the people, the majority of the people had this negativity. And they looked at the world negative. And they wanted a guy like Bilam, who was a power-hungry guy, who had a bad eye, and that's what it was. And that's why they raised him as their leader. So I always ask the question, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, and I don't mean this facetiously, but like, how is it possible that the leader of the so-called free world, or once was the leader of the free world, I don't know what it is now, but could be a person who is clearly not, to whatever level of senility or not cognitive clarity the president has now, it's pretty obvious to anyone who looks, how could it be? God is this is the leader. And I told you a few weeks ago, the answer is because the people don't have any minds anymore. The most obvious thing in the country, it's a man, a woman. The things that like just any amount of normal understanding would dictate this is true is no longer obvious to the world. They don't know what's a woman. I don't know what's a man. I don't know. So if your country has no mind, your leader won't have a mind. It's very simple. And why am I telling? I said that before. Why am I telling that again? Because I don't know what the majority is. When people say, well, it's the election. I don't know. Was it real? I don't know the majority people hold. I think in America, majority, and maybe in the world, majority of the people have a mind to understand certain things that just are obvious. I think most people do. So you have some people who are like anarchists, and then you have some people who understand, and then you have the people in the middle who stop thinking because they went out to Facebook. I don't need to think anymore. Facebook tells me what to think. Why should I think? Twitter tells me what to tweet. So they don't think. So what happens is that now this is why it's important to take back the country, to take back. And again, I don't know. I'm not telling you exactly how to do it politically, but in terms of your importance here to understand these things. And one of the things that Bilam did, and I want to share this because it's really very, very important. And it's a little bit funny. It's a little strange for me to say it. And I don't say it in a way of me because I'm a person who learns some Torah. I try to do it as I can. I'm not saying I'm But the thing is like this: Bilam, when he said to God, he said, "I'm going to give you the whole world, and I'll make them do what you say, but I don't want this Jewish people business. I want a universalism." The Rebbe says that was one of Bilam's statements. And God said, no, there's the Jewish people, whatever, I'm not saying this, whatever Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Abraham and Yaakov did, whatever they did, that was, so God said, that is my people. And the important part is everyone in the world can get a portion of the world to come. But it's important as Noach to realize it's really through connecting to the Jewish people. And I say why it's called this thing. I'm not saying anything about me or my, but this is what God said. Hashem said, these are my chosen people, and everyone who connects to them and assists them and wants them to bring out the Torah, those are people that have a portion of the world to come. And Bilam was trying to separate that. He wanted his own power base. He wanted his own honor. And for whatever reasons, and we could talk about that, but God set it up in such a way that the Jewish people have to be the what's we'll call them it's called the Meleches Kohanim. The verse says a nation of priests. I mean, that nation of holy people who have to do the work, and everyone has to be part of that mission. You want to be part of that mission. You want to be able to find ways to encourage, as opposed to the people who want to go and give Iran a nuclear bomb. And people have to stand up and say, no, this is God's people, and we are part of it too. And you're part of it. And that's where you have to all stand up and to reclaim this truth that the nations of the world are not fighting a battle against God and against God's people. They're part of the mission. And that's why these nuts that are telling you the opposite, you got to say, this is wrong. This is not true. This is not what I want to be part of. And once you do that, you help in this time, which is a time to rebuild the temple. Because these 3 weeks of difficulty will eventually become 3 weeks of tremendous joy. And they'll eventually lead to building of the third temple. And you want to be there. You want to be part of that. And you should. That's why I'm talking to you all. Because the fact that you're thinking and you're asking and you're not stuck in the Bilam mindset. The Bilam mindset is, no, I'm going to do what I want. I don't care what God wants. I'm pushing my thing because I think I'm in control of reality. And the wise person realizes, no, what I want to do is I want to do all the work that I can to then be a vessel to be able to receive what God wants, because I know that's good. I know it's good. I know it's good for me. I know it's good for you. I know it's good for the entire world. That's the time right now, and that is what we have to do. And I wanted to encourage you all you smart people, and you really amazing people who are living in a world of nut jobs running the show right now, who are looking and saying, something's not right. And I want to be in the right side of history, not the wrong side. I want to encourage you and bless you to be able to really to bring that out for you and your countries and for the entire world.
I was wondering if you could cite the source where Moses prayed to stop prophecy in the non-Jewish world.
Yeah. It's the verses Niflinu ani v'amcha, and it says it's in Shmos. It's in the book of Exodus. If you ever ask Jews about verse and chapter, they don't do that, because the verse and chapter really was added later on. That was not really the Torah was not given. The Torah was given what's called parashas, separate parashas. It wasn't given in the verse. The verses were actually a non-Jewish addition.
Okay, it's in the book
exactly
of Exodus.
Place. I can find it for you. It should be the fifth Aliyah, the fifth reading. It's the fifth reading of the parasha in the book of Shmos, in the chapter of Kitisa, and it says Moshe says to God, when he asked him to show me your face, right? It says show me your glory, and then he says that after it says v'naflinu, and we will become unique, me and your people, and that was the verse where he said the uniqueness would be prophecy. And I want to just point out, by the way, that's not referring to what's called Ruach HaKodesh. Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, it says, I saw this recently, that is open to everybody in the world. Moshe only took away prophecy. Prophecy, which is different than what's called Ruach HaKodesh. Anyone who works and tries and does whatever they want to do, and they learn and they make their whole mind towards God, they will have that inspiration. That's not taken away. The prophecy, which we don't have today anyway, unfortunately, Jews don't have prophecy either now. We stopped in the time of the Second Temple. But again, the Second Temple was the end of prophecy, so we don't have it either. But prophecy was very different than what's called divine inspiration. Divine inspiration, if I work towards it and my mind is totally connected to God, I will have that flow, and that goes for everybody. Prophecy is very different. Prophecy is very unique because it says, Maimonides writes that the prophets would prepare themselves. They get to a high spiritual level. They would sit and be happy. And then maybe God would speak to them, maybe he wouldn't.
Right.
Prophecy was no guarantee. Prophecy was if God wanted to tell you the prophecy, prophecy was direct communication that he would give. And that after Bilam, that was taken away. And that was a unique quality that's only given to Jews But the other ones, what's called divine inspiration, that is still available to everyone. And unfortunately, we don't have prophecy either now because we've fallen to a much lower level. But God willing, in times of Mashiach, then there will be prophecy again.
Well, thank you very much for that answer. I'll look it up for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have Sandy as a question.
Yes, correct me if I'm wrong, Rabbi, but I remember reading somewhere that the men of the Great Assembly prayed that the desire for idolatry be taken away, and they would give up prophecy if that spirit to desire idolatry would be taken away. Is that correct? Am I remembering that wrong, or what?
Yeah, Sandy, you're pretty pretty knowledgeable. It's pretty impressive. So what you're saying is accurate. I'm not sure which source you saw it from. It's brought in a few sources, and I'll explain to you what it is. Even though this is a very important concept, but I now that you asked it, I will explain it. So I told you before, there's a side of good and a side of bad, and that's why God created it. Because if there's only the side of good, then I would have no challenge in life to choose the good or the negative. So there has to be a challenge. Now, today, we don't really see a real desire for idolatry. The people that do idolatry still in India, wherever they do it, it's like relics. Like, this is what our great grandparents did, so we do it. But there's no real, like back in the old days, you go look at archaeology, there was like this desire for idolatry. Why is it a powerful desire? The reason why there was, because there was a parallel balance. To get the ability to connect to God in that deepest way of prophecy, there had to be the opposite challenge, which was trying to connect to impurity. Now, what happened was, during the first temple time, if you read in the book of Kings, you'll see there was idolatry. There were the kings in the 10 tribes, the kings of the northern kingdom, that they were idolaters. And the reason was because it was a tremendous temptation. And I want to help you understand why it's tremendous temptation. Imagine you could hook into spiritual powers. I'm not even getting to good or bad right now, but you could hook into something. You could connect. You could understand what's going to happen. I mean, you kidding me? People would be betting on the lotto and the Super Bowl, and you could hook in. Wow, you could draw in these powers. So it was a tremendous draw. It felt, even for the people who were impure, it felt spiritual. It felt, I'm hooking into something. They weren't necessarily hooking into good things, but they were hooking into something. It was a very powerful desire. So in the time of the first temple, when the temple was destroyed, it was largely destroyed because of this idolatry that crept in different places in the Jewish world also. Like Yerovam ben Nevat, the first king of the 10 tribes, and he brought that in, and then all the process. You read the Book of Kings. So, but what happened was, so the men of the Great Assembly, when the Jews came back in the Second Temple time, they realized this power was so still powerful that people were going to make the same mistake and fall again. So what they did is they turned down the heat. If you're playing a poker game and it's $1,000 an ante, that's a lot. So they lowered the level. They said, okay, so we're not going to play on that high stakes because we didn't succeed the first time. So we want to lower the challenge. So let's get idolatry out of the world. But by lowering the negative, you also affect the equal and opposite challenge. Because the prophecy would still happen and there wouldn't be a desire for idolatry, then what would happen is that people would, of course, go for the good because they wouldn't really have a challenge on the other side. Amazing, Sandy. Amazing you read that. And that was a very, very deep thing. And it's not exactly this because they definitely are pushing things that you're supposed to believe, and which is, and this is a new thing because I see everyone here, everyone here is older than probably 20 years old, doesn't matter, but we didn't grow up in that kind of world where, if you had your own thoughts, there was no way to have this reach to call you a bigot, racist, Nazi, because you thought what you thought. But now the reach is tremendous because, I could put in social media. I could, destroy a person the other side of the world. I could just say this person's terrible because they don't share my views. So yeah, so that part is true. Again, I agree. It's an amazing new process that's happened. We have these people who have wrong beliefs. They say that it's the right belief. And they say, not only that if you disagree with my belief, that I need to take you out because you're a danger to society. That's what's happening. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Any more questions? I'm going to take one or two more. Actually, I don't think it's an issue, but my carbon monoxide thing is chirping, which makes me think that the battery's dead and we're fine, but I will go check it out. So let's take one or two more and have the window open. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? Okay, well, we'll end a little early today. That'll help me out to go check out what's going on in my basement. I hear the sounds. But let's take this to heart. And again, I really want to give you guys what's called, they say in Hebrew, it's called chizuk. I want to give you strength because the fact that you are people that are thinking and asking and willing to go against the tide is what the world needs right now. It needs it very, very strongly. It needs it for everyone. We all need to do this, and that's what's going to happen. What happened is that it's funny because you were saying before you were asking me, Dan. Like I said to you earlier, that if the nations of the world understood what the temple provided for them,
right?
Now that they destroyed, they would put 24-hour guards against it. So what happened? So the leaders told them, no, these Jews, they're terrible. We want to take them down. The stories that were created by the people and their leadership led to hurting the people themselves in a terrible, terrible way. And so therefore, a person has to be strong and has to be straight and has to understand what's true and not let any lies dictate and pollute their thinking. Doesn't mean you don't question. It means the opposite. One of the things in Christianity that is very difficult to understand is this kind of concept of blind faith. The more illogical it is, then you have to believe.
Oh, you're so on the money there.
I want you to understand something. God gave you a mind, and the mind thinks a certain way. He's not going to create you in a way that the highest part of you is contrary to what is real. That doesn't mean there's not levels what we call amuna. I don't want to use the word faith because then I go into the wrong understandings. But there is levels of my mind takes me to one place and I have to go beyond. But that's true. But to understand that in the first stages, it has to line up because God gave me this mind. So I'm not worried about when I say to be strong on truth, I don't mean to be blind faith. I can't ask. No, ask your questions when you have the truth. I'm not afraid of any question. I might know none of the answer, but I know someone else is going to know. I'm going to find it in a book. I'm going to find it in the Torah. I'm going to find it from my rabbis because I'm not afraid of the questions. And you must ask the questions. If you don't ask the questions, then you're not going to understand. If you buy into say, "Oh, this is true," and I can't ask anything, then you really won't understand. So the reality is that when I say be strong with the truth, I don't mean in the old-fashioned way that you may have heard as a kid of like, don't ask questions. No, ask your questions. Think. How does this work? Why is that? How does it work? Think. God gave us a mind. gives
Rabbi.
God, because the mind lines up with the truth. It doesn't contradict it.
Rabbi, on that note, with the members of the Great Assembly praying against idolatry, and then the balance, the loss of prophecy, with Christianity being a form of idolatry, but you can see the morphing into the belief system you're talking about. It's not quite the exact, here's the stone idol. It tries to incorporate some spiritual element, but you can still see the same hard attitude from, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's what he said. But said, well, even historically, I think that's what happened. I think that there was a point where the Roman world was changing. A lot of conversion was happening, and Christianity kind of came in the middle and created this quasi.
And once the temple was destroyed, they could push whatever.
Yeah, and also it quasi dynamic, which was like it kept some pagan things. It kept but it 3 gods instead of 1,000, whatever. It and that's why the Noahide thing is really coming alive now, is because most thinking people really do believe in one God. So if you had a tradition that tried to explain 3 and 1 and 1 and 3, at a certain point you say, well, why am I doing this?
Right.
Why do I need that for? Right? There's one God, of course. Why do I want to go in a person? I don't want to do that. But and that's what the inheritance that people had from their forefathers. This was the belief. But the advanced mind that I think the world has developed in this sense is more in line with the idea of one God, and therefore they say, why should I go? And that's why this is happening now, because people are saying, okay, I believe in one God. Why do I want to have an idea of a human being? And then it doesn't make sense. And trying to force it into the thing that deep down is true. There is one creator, is perfect. It's not. If it's not a perfect creator, it's a superhero. It's not God. It's not God. And then you have all one power, another power, and it keeps going on, because that's not God. That's like that's Marvel Comics. Okay, everybody, I'm going to go check out my carbon monoxide filter.
Rabbi, are you aiming to be on for next week as well?
Next week, God willing, yeah.
God willing. Okay, folks. So tentatively, we're on for next week. I think we're going to sign out for today. Thank you so much, Rabbi Ingber, and all the folks down in Texas at the Netiv Zoom room, and from all around the planet. I know Ronald's from Australia and a few other people from abroad. So it's always a joy to get together and discuss the wonderful light of Torah. And thank you once again, Rabbi Ingber. We look forward to seeing you next week. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, everybody. Bye for now.
All the best. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Recording stopped.